West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
It's not over. It is not over. President Biden's legislative agenda was declared dead yesterday after Senator Joe Manchin said, quote, "This is a no on this legislation." That was his exact sentence that set everything off. This is a no on this legislation. Now, President Joe Biden knows that a statement like that simply means that if you change something in that legislation, then the no can become a yes. And so last night, Joe Biden and Joe Manchin spent some time on the phone together. And now we know that this morning, Joe Manchin and Pramila Jayapal spent some time on the phone together. Washington Post reports this about the president's call with Joe Manchin. It was cordial, and both men signaled they would try to work on a new deal next year, according to two people with knowledge of the call who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss private conversation. The Washington Post is also reporting that Joe Manchin's final counteroffer to Joe Biden was a $1.8 trillion version of the bill that did not include an extension of the child tax credit, but did include the largest amount of climate-related spending in history and other Biden priorities. Joe Manchin's original starting point was $1.5 trillion, so that was up from his original starting point. The White House was considering how to respond to the Manchin $1.8 trillion offer over the weekend when Joe Manchin reportedly shocked the White House by saying his version of no on television. Now, Joe Manchin is fond of saying, as he did yesterday, that if he can't go home and explain to the people of West Virginia, then he can't vote for it. What he did not explain to the people of West Virginia yesterday is why he is opposed to helping West Virginians and people in the rest of the country to live above the poverty line with the help of the child tax credit. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer today, in a letter to Democratic senators who have all left Washington for the Christmas recess, he wrote, "Senators should be aware that the Senate will, in fact, consider the Build Back Better Act very early in the new year so that every member of this body has the opportunity to make their position known on the Senate floor, not just on television." Now, that could mean that Senator Schumer will bring a version of the reconciliation bill to the Senate floor and let the amendment process decide the final shape of that bill, which is the traditional way of handling legislation like this. While he was at it, Senator Schumer promised a vote on voting rights, which might include, Senator Schumer suggested it would include, changing the rules of the Senate to have that vote. Senator Schumer indicated that would be the very first thing. Voting rights would be the very first thing that the Senate does in January. We'll have more on that later in this hour. It's only in the 21st century, as I was just talking to Rachel about this, it was only in the 21st century that we have seen Senate leadership on both sides writing legislation that then goes to the Senate floor so that in a form that cannot be changed, so that the party, the majority party then agrees basically to vote down every amendment. That's only a recent development, and that empowers each senator in trying to reach that agreement among all the Democratic senators. Twitter exploded yesterday with the outrage at the notion that one man elected by 290,510 people can decide the fate of a nation of 330 million people. But the people who are expressing that outrage yesterday did not express that same outrage. When one man who was elected by 1,359,267 people decided the fate of the nation on the Senate floor at 1:29 a.m. That was one man deciding the fate of the nation. And the people who are objecting to that concept this weekend were very much in favor of John McCain casting that one vote. In fact, the design of this government often allows one man or one woman to decide the fate of the nation. And some of the people who have that power were not voted into office by anyone, like members of the Supreme Court. Every 5-4 Supreme Court decision is the product of one person having the power to decide the fate of the nation. Joe Manchin did not invent the power that he has. The power of one man or one woman in the Senate or the House of Representatives or the Supreme Court or the presidency to decide the fate of the nation has been with us since the Constitution was written. So what is it like? What is it like to have that power? We saw this Senate drama once before with character dynamics that were the stuff of a great screenplay. A Democratic president's signature legislation is in front of the Senate. The Democrats have a majority of 56 senators, but six Democratic senators, are opposed to the Democratic president's legislation. 49 senators are in favor, and one Democratic senator is undecided, and the undecided senator ran against the president for the Democratic presidential nomination the year before the vote. This is 1993. Bill Clinton is in the White House. He has what was then considered a massive budget reconciliation bill that has sailed through the House of Representatives and is now stuck in the Senate. It's on the floor of the Senate, but there's only 49 votes supporting it. A 50th vote, a 50th Democratic vote, will allow Vice President Al Gore to cast the tie-breaking vote, and Bill Clinton will get to sign his first major piece of legislation into law. Bob Kerrey of Nebraska is the undecided senator. He went into New Hampshire the year before looking like the most stable Democratic candidate for president, while the Clinton campaign appeared to be drowning in scandal, but Bill Clinton became the comeback kid in New Hampshire and went on to win the presidency. Television cameras followed Bob Kerrey everywhere he went for a couple of weeks in the summer of 1993 as Senator Kerrey decided how to make up his mind on a budget reconciliation bill that was significantly different from what he would have offered that year if he were president of the United States. Now, no one then suspected Bob Kerrey of grandstanding or trying to get attention in any way. He didn't need the attention. He had been a big star in Washington from his first day. He arrived as a Vietnam combat veteran who had won the Medal of Honor for a combat engagement in which he lost his leg in Vietnam. In his first book about the Clinton presidency, Bob Woodward reported on the day-by-day tension leading up to that vote on the Senate floor, including a phone call, just like Joe Biden and Joe Manchin had last night. But this was a phone call between President Clinton and Senator Kerrey. Clinton again pleaded with Kerrey that he needed his vote. My presidency's going to go down, he said sharply, by now shouting. I do not like the argument that I'm bringing the presidency down, Kerrey shouted back, getting fed up. Clinton shouted that the defeat would do precisely that. Kerrey could not flee from his responsibility. I really resent the argument that somehow I'm responsible for your presidency surviving, Kerrey bellowed. F you, Clinton yelled. And finally, on the night of the vote, Bob Kerrey entered the Senate chamber, and everyone in the Senate and everyone at the White House held their breath.
Mr. President, I see the distinguished senator from Nebraska has arrived in the chamber, and I asked the senator how much time he'll require. 15 minutes. Mr. President, I yield 15 minutes to the distinguished senator from Nebraska, Mr. Kerry.
Senator from recognized.
Mr. President,
Senate will be in order.
Mr. President, I've taken too long, I'm afraid, to reach this decision. My head, I confess, aches with all the thinking. I do not trust what my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will do if I say no.
Senator Kerry then spoke to the Republicans in the chamber in language that seems written for today.
You have locked yourselves together into the idea of opposition. Opposition, not to an idea, but to a man. A man who came to this town green and experienced in our ways, and who wants America to do better, to be better, and to continue to believe in the invincibility of ideas, of courage and action.
And after announcing he was going to vote yes, he then spoke directly to the man who told him he was holding the presidency in his hands.
President Clinton, if you're watching now, as I suspect you are, I tell you this. I could not and should not cast the vote that brings down your presidency. You have made mistakes and know it far better than I. But you do not deserve, and America cannot afford, to have you spend the next 60 days quibbling over whether or not we should have this cut or this tax increase.
If Joe Manchin can find his way to the kind of compromise with the president that Bob Kerrey found, Joe Manchin could have a moment on the Senate floor, or the 15 minutes on the Senate floor, as Bob Kerrey did, and deliver a speech that everyone who saw it would never forget, and get the same reaction from the Senate that Bob Kerrey got.
But the challenge for us, and too much is at stake for us to even consider the possibility of failure, is for us to end this distrust and to put this two-partisan debate behind us, and for the sake of our place in history, rise to the high road the occasion requires. President, I yield the floor.
It is Tuesday, the 21st of December of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Well, it's Tuesday, and one of our listeners and a follower on Twitter lives in the Philippines, and of course they had that deadly and devastating typhoon roar through there, so I was a bit concerned because I hadn't heard from him in several days over the weekend, and fortunately last night he did respond. He and his family are okay where they were located. They didn't have the massive effects of the typhoon, but the islands were pretty well flattened for the most part. I bring it up because he always reminds me about the hot smoked Hungarian paprika shtick that I do. So just a pinch, a mere pinch. But that's Iceman Bob, and so good to hear that Iceman Bob and family are safe and sound. So there, good thing. Well, I guess we're still in the throes of Manchin, and maybe he and Joe Biden will come to some sort of gentleman's agreement. I guess the word is that he felt that he being named as an obstructionist, well, they didn't call him an obstructionist, but there was some statement put out by the White House that named him, and he just thought that was so untoward. Yeah, well, so then what does he do? What's his knee-jerk reaction? go out there and give a bunch of racist tropes that the Republicans have been floating for decades. Welfare queens, pimp daddies, that kind of thing. I don't know. You go back to your tried and true strategies, I suppose. Joe Manchin, what's up, buddy? He was afraid, apparently, according to him, that if we gave people the child tax credit, well, then they'll just go out and spend their money on drugs and go hunting. There's always projection with people, right? If he's worried about the first thing they do when they get money is buy drugs and go hunting, I wonder if that's what Joe Manchin's been doing. Oh, and one other pet peeve, that is not a houseboat. That is a yacht. Okay? Houseboat. Always cracks me up when they call it a houseboat. It's not a houseboat. Yeah, he might be living on it. That means he's a liveaboard. That doesn't mean that he lives on a houseboat. His boat might be his house, but it's not a houseboat. Okay? It's a motor craft, and it is a yacht. God, people. Normally, houseboats don't have the engines, and they're docked, year round. Okay? They usually don't motor out. Usually. I know there are people who rent, quote, houseboats on Lake Shasta, for instance, and motor them around. A little bit different, okay? What Joe has is a yacht, Joe Manchin. A yacht. Stop calling it a houseboat. Man. So he's concerned about people spending their money willy-nilly, and he's got a houseboat, a Harley, and a Maserati. Okay, conspicuous consumption, I guess, shows a rich man has some reputation, huh? I guess. Well, that's thumbing your nose at people. And also, does this guy have that much of an ego? Yes, he does. You have to have somewhat of an ego to do what a politician does. If you're practicing non-ego as a Buddhist practice, you're not going to be a very effective politician, generally. There might be some who break through, but I doubt very much it would be the prevailing kind of behavior. Nope. It's all about ego. Okay. And Joe Manchin proved that. Now, of course, we are putting the onus all on Joe Manchin and disregarding the fact that 50 Republicans are responsible for tanking Build Back Better because it would make Joe Biden look good. More jobs than, way more jobs than, even almost more jobs than what Trump lost. Everybody loves Build Back Better, and they, meaning the Republicans, cannot have that. They've got to gum up the works. And of course, ratings were all downgraded after Joe Manchin made his announcement so that the economy might tank. And then the Republicans can point to that and say, Joe Biden did that. He's such a loser. But there are some good things that Joe Biden has done that we just don't get to hear about. Because the media has this thing that Joe Biden has to be worse, well, as bad or worse than Donald Trump. I mean, you still have Republican candidates out there refusing to admit that Joe Biden won. Either outright lying and saying no, or they dance around the question. A whole party at odds with the United States of America, while we are under attack from a hostile foreign power. Ooh, you know what that's called? Yeah, you know what that's called. We can play the game of, can you imagine if a Democrat did this? We can play that game forever. In fact, we have been. Because we would never do what they are doing right now. When Trump won in 2016 and everybody knew he had Russian help, we just had to suck it up and accept it. So we tried to put in laws and procedures so that wouldn't happen again. And what did the Republicans do? They weakened every single one of those and called us extremists. They just want to hold on to power. We don't have any power, buddy. Don't be turning this around like we're the ones that are gumming up the works, Mr. Grim Reaper of the graveyard where democracy goes to die, McConnell. Out there saying that we just want to hold on to unbridled power because we're trying to protect elections from foreign influence. They even voted that down, kicked it out. Now you can't find a Republican that will just admit the simple fact that Joe Biden won. Suck it up. You're stacking the elections for in your favor already with the gerrymandering, etc., etc., etc. Suck it up and get more votes if you can. No, they can't. That's why they're trying to purge voting rolls, trying to keep as many people from voting as they can. Not one Republican can admit that Joe Biden won and is president. Not one. And for 4 years, we had to put up with a mobbed-up Russian asset in the Oval Office, taking secret meetings with Putin, making secret arrangements and agreements that we don't know about that we're still suffering through right now. Now, I suppose we could also direct our ire towards Merrick Garland because he hasn't arrested anybody yet. I'm kind of keeping my fingers crossed that the guy plays it close to the vest. And I think that maybe what he's doing is that he's letting the January 6th Commission do their work, their due diligence. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed that when they request criminal indictments, that he will. But I also fear that the Department of Justice is so corrupted by these maggot Nazis embedded deep within the deep state that's the reason why Merrick Garland can't do anything. I also wonder, as I mentioned yesterday, Trump's whole modus operandi, which he has admitted to in public, on Howard Stern's show, on TV, in his ghost-written books, that when someone crosses him, he exacts revenge at 10 times the amount that he got. Somebody swings at you, you pound him into the ground 10 times harder. So here you have a guy who had access to every file of every American. Do you think for one moment that he doesn't have dirt on Merrick Garland? That's what he does. That's been his business practice. When he says he doesn't want to pay a contractor for all the work they did, he digs up dirt on them. So he doesn't have to pay. That's his M.O. You look at Merrick Garland and you go, wow, that guy's pretty straight and narrow. There couldn't be anything in his closet. Well, we don't know now, do we? He has been exceedingly quiet and seemingly ineffectual. Seemingly. Because I will say, this is unlike the previous attorney generals. Even the big dick toilet guy couldn't keep his mouth shut. Barr was out there just lying through his teeth to set the agenda before the facts came out. So everybody remembers the lie and not the fact. So I will hand it to Merrick Garland that is not happening, and that may be why we think he's ineffectual, because he's not playing the political game like the previous attorney generals for the last 4 years. Generals, attorneys generals, there were many. I mean, some people don't even remember the big dick toilet guy. He was an AG. Yep. Well, you know what? Today I take in the little Yorkshire poodle, Ginger, for a surgery on her right rear leg, having a patella surgery and the tendons underneath. Apparently that breed of dog, there's a groove behind the kneecap in which the tendon and some other linkages fit in this little groove. But apparently that breed of dog, that groove isn't very deep, and it's really easy for the tendons and patella to slip out of place. And she was a 3-legged dog for a little bit late last week through the weekend. So scheduled her for surgery, but we were thinking it might be March because you know how it is with COVID. They're backed up. But they had a couple of cancellations, and her surgery's not a normal type surgery, and so she got bumped up, and today we take her in. When I say we, it's the royal we. I'm taking her in. And she'll have to stay overnight. Now, I haven't really asked them, well, is she going to be hobbling around? What's going on for her recuperation? But I'll find out. It doesn't really matter. She needs the procedure. Also, she's getting quite old, so she takes heart medicine and whatnot, and has a few issues with skin infections. So we have a special medicated shampoo, and I have to take care of her ears because she has ears infections, so we have to take care of that. And got to pick up some liver medicine because she has some sort of chemistry coming out with her liver that needs to be attended to. So we'll get some liver medicine for her, too, that they have spoken about. But as soon as we're done here, I'm out the door. I hope maybe during some of the break I might be able to get dressed into some proper clothes so I don't have to take little Ginger to the vets in my pajamas. Now, I know everybody around here walks around, goes to the store. They probably even go to church in their jammies. But I'm of a certain age, and I will not do that. I won't. I can't. Okay. So we do have that curated show, and what is this curated show that we have curated for you today? Yes, at the top, Manchin's no doesn't mean Biden's agenda is dead. Okay. Kamala came right out and said, hey, we're working hard as ever on Build Back Better. It might be Build Back Later, but it's still going to be Build Back. Oh, one other thing, all that steel rusting down there along the southern border that Trump tried to build his wall and was all a grift. That steel could be used, repurposed. There's a lot of small bridges over creeks and stuff in various municipalities and rural areas that need some upgrade on their bridges. Well, you take that rusting steel, grind it down, coat it, and start using it. Come on. Build Back Better. Okay. On the rest of the menu, the Pentagon issued rules at stopping the rise of extremism among the ranks, and expect Fox News to lay out the propaganda that these liberals want to kick out all the good Americans. No, we're kicking out the Nazis. If you think Nazis are good Americans, you're a Nazi. Or at least a Nazi sympathizer. But I think that actually Fox News are Nazis. The Department of Justice warned mortgage service providers and landlords to heed the pandemic-related pro-military housing rules. Follow the rules. And a second lawsuit has been filed challenging the New Hampshire law, making it illegal to teach about racism. After the break, we move to the chef's table where, citing increased threats from Russia, the U.S. advised Americans against traveling to Ukraine. And 2 Polish opposition leaders were hacked with the NSO Pegasus spyware. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and Kelly Lincoln monitors that chat room, so thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link across the page near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page, and if you could afford an espresso type coffee drink, and if you could afford to send those funds to us once a month, it really helps us pay our bills. And those bills keep increasing, let alone the costs for upgrades on hardware and software. And so if you could afford that espresso type coffee drink and send those funds our way, we would greatly appreciate it. And I know it's the holidays, so when you can, please do. Because I hate to tell you this, even after 11 years, we're not rolling in cash. Yeah, I guess we don't have a business model that sells. That's not why we got into this. But thank you for your citizen involvement, because we do, as I mentioned, greatly appreciate it. And we will continue doing this powerhouse of resistance as we have been doing for almost 11 years with your help. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we are thankful that he does. I take care of at Justice Putnam, because that's me, and I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. You know who they are. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. All right. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Associated Press by Lolita C. Baldor. Warning that extremism in the ranks is increasing, Pentagon officials issued detailed new rules prohibiting service members from actively engaging in extremist activities. The new guidelines come nearly a year after some current and former service members participated in the riot at the U.S. Capitol, triggering a broad department review. It was not a riot. It was an insurrection. And these military types need to be court-martialed and thrown in the brig. And those former service members need to have their pensions attached. It was not a riot. According to the Pentagon, fewer than 100 military members are known to have been involved in substantiated cases of extremist activity in the past year, but they warn that the number may grow given recent spikes in domestic violent extremism, particularly among veterans. Officials said the new policy doesn't largely change what is prohibited, but is more of an effort to make sure troops are clear on what they can and cannot do while still protecting their First Amendment right to free speech. And for the first time, it is far more specific about social media. The new policy lays out in detail the banned activities, which range from advocating terrorism or supporting the overthrow of the government to fundraising or rallying on behalf of an extremist group or liking or reposting extremist views on social media. The rules also specify that commanders must determine two things in order for someone to be held accountable: that the action was an extremist activity, as defined in the rules, and that the service member actively participated in that prohibited activity. Previous policies banned extremist activities but didn't go into such great detail, and also did not specify the two-step process to determine someone accountable. What was wrong yesterday is still wrong today, said one senior defense official, but several officials said that as a study group spoke with service members this year, they found that many wanted clearer definitions of what was not allowed. The officials provided additional details about the rules on condition of anonymity because they were not made public. The military has long been aware of small numbers of white supremacists and other extremists among the troops. I think is bigger than a small number, please. But Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and other leaders launched a broader campaign to root out extremism in the force after it became clear that military veterans and some current service members were present at the January 6th insurrection. Well, thank you, AP. You finally used that word. In a message to the force yesterday, Monday, Austin said the department believes that only a few service members violate their oath and participate in extremist activities. But he added, even the actions of a few can have an outsized impact on unit cohesion, morale, and readiness. And the physical harm some of these activities can engender can undermine the safety of our people, he said. The risk of extremism in the military can be more dangerous because many service members have access to classified information about sensitive military operations or other national security information that could help adversaries. And extremist groups routinely recruit former and current service members because of their familiarity with weapons and combat tactics. Press staff brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The Department of Justice and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau are warning mortgage servicers and landlords to heed rules meant to protect members of the U.S. military against foreclosure, eviction, and other potential housing-related financial hardships during the pandemic. The move comes as forbearance programs put in place in the early weeks of the pandemic last year to allow homeowners to hit pause on their mortgage payments are set to expire at the end of the month. The Department of Justice also said it has received complaints from service members and veterans who ran into problems after entering into COVID-19 hardship mortgage forbearance program, including being reported as delinquent borrowers for not making timely payments and being required to make lump sum payments to reinstate their home loans. The complaints are being reviewed by the CFPB. All told, roughly 7.6 million homeowners entered forbearance during the pandemic, and that was according to the DOJ. A majority of borrowers have resumed making their mortgage payments, but roughly 1.25 million others, many military personnel or veterans, remain in forbearance programs about to expire, the government said. Members of the military have legal protections established, so they are free to comply with their service requirements, such as a potentially lengthy deployment overseas. Among the protections, mortgage servicers, which manage payment collection on home loans, are not allowed to foreclose on or evict certain service members or their families without a court order. The DOJ and the CFPB's letter to landlords focused on reminding them of the legal protections that apply to military tenants, including rules that make it possible for them to terminate their lease early. Of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A second lawsuit representing teachers and 2 administrators has been filed against New Hampshire officials over the state's new anti-discrimination laws, saying that educators are confused about what they can legally teach and train and risk losing their jobs if they unwittingly violate the laws. The National Education Association New Hampshire, which represents the majority of all public school employees in the state, and two diversity, equity, and inclusion school administrators, sued New Hampshire Education Commissioner Frank Edelblut, Commission on Human Rights Chair Christian Kim, and Executive Director Ani Malachi, and Labor Commissioner Kenneth Merrifield in federal court yesterday, Monday. The group is represented by a broad coalition of lawyers, including those representing the ACLU of New Hampshire, the Disability Rights Center New Hampshire, GLBTQ legal advocates and defenders. The Prohibition on Teaching Discrimination provision prohibits teaching children that they are inferior, racist, sexist, or oppressive by virtue of their race, gender, or other characteristics. The right to freedom from discrimination in public workplaces and education prohibits training sessions or programs teaching that one identified group possesses natural, biological, or innate characteristics as opposed to apparent or accidental characteristics that make them inferior, racist, sexist, or oppressive. In other words, the anti-discrimination laws is to prevent discrimination against racists and bigots. Okay. The laws allow disciplinary action to be taken against teachers who violate them. An earlier version of the legislation echoed a now rescinded Trump administration order that sought to ban discussion of divisive concepts in schools. The lawsuit asked the court to declare the laws unconstitutional and bar its enforcement, similar to a suit filed last week by AFT New Hampshire Union, 3 high school teachers, and 2 parents. One of the plaintiffs in the new case, Andres Maya, is Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice at the Exeter Region Cooperative School District. He conducts staff trainings on concepts such as implicit and institutional bias, racism, belonging, and inclusiveness. Because the law is ambiguous, he will potentially subject himself to a complaint, the lawsuit said. Maya also fields inquiries from teachers as to whether certain books, video content, curriculum, materials, and information, as well as what a teacher would say, would be banned. He said he is unable to answer those questions under the current laws. This law chills the very type of diversity, equity, and inclusion work that is absolutely necessary to ensure that each student is seen, heard, and connected, especially as New Hampshire becomes more diverse, Maya said in a statement, with co-plaintiff Christina Kim Philbott, the Chief Equity Officer of the Manchester School District. Merrifield referred comment to the Attorney General's office, which said it is, quote, reviewing the complaint and will defend these laws, end quote. The Education Department and Human Rights Commission said last week it does not comment on pending litigation. They never do. All right, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
The discovery of penicillin in 1928 by Alexander Fleming was one of the greatest scientific achievements of the 20th century. It's hard to imagine a world before the development of what many consider to be miracle drugs. However, just 90 years ago, antibiotics weren't available. Thanks to antibiotics, some common illnesses such as strep throat, are now easily treated, whereas in the past they often led to serious complications. Antibiotics serve an important role in keeping you and your loved ones healthy, but it's important to remember that antibiotics only treat bacterial infections. Most common infections such as colds, flu, most sore throats, bronchitis, and many sinus and ear infections are caused by viruses and do not respond to antibiotic treatment. These infections can be overcome by simply treating the symptoms and letting the illness run its course. Unfortunately, antibiotics have often been overused, resulting in decreased effectiveness and an increase in antibiotic-resistant diseases. Antibiotic resistance, or the increased ability of bacteria to survive in the presence of antibiotics, has become a major public health threat that we all need to help fight. When a person takes antibiotics, they are at risk for possibly having a bad reaction to these drugs. Some side effects can be quite serious, or even life-threatening in the case of an allergic reaction or severe diarrhea. This is why it is very important to only use antibiotics when they are absolutely needed, and not for viral infections. Talk to your healthcare professional about the best treatment for your illness. If it is caused by a virus, follow his or her recommendation for treating the symptoms. Learn more about appropriate antibiotic use and how to feel better when you don't need an antibiotic by visiting CDC's Get Smart, Know When Antibiotics Work website at cdc.gov/getsmart/community.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. When the Mayflower sought refuge in what is now known as Provincetown Harbor in the fall of 1620, there was disagreement between the Pilgrims and those the Pilgrims called the Strangers, who were laborers, craftsmen, and others brought aboard to help with the practical work of running a colony. The Virginia Company had granted the Pilgrims the right to settle land near the Hudson River, not in Massachusetts. Now that they had anchored outside of the territory controlled by the Virginia Company, some of the strangers argued that they were no longer bound by the contract. With discord growing, the Pilgrims and strangers negotiated an agreement now called the Mayflower Compact, which was signed by 41 male passengers. The Mayflower Compact is today seen as an example of the social contract theory, which meant that the colonists consented to be governed under mutually agreed upon laws for the general good of the colony. Social contract theory stands in opposition to the divine right theory, which holds that God ordained a monarch to rule, and thus the will of monarchs must always be obeyed, despite any opposition from the people. The Pilgrims took pains, however, to describe themselves in the compact as loyal subjects of our dread sovereign lord, King James. The Mayflower Compact remains as an important early example of self-government in the colonies, and social contract theory is essential to the American conception of popular sovereignty, or rule by the people. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
I'm Rick Smith. and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That was the day that Red Scare deportations began. 249 radicals, including anarcho-feminist Emma Goldman, were packed onto the USS Buford and deported to Russia. The year of 1919 had seen massive social convulsions. The Seattle General Strike had kicked off the year. It was followed by coal strikes and steel strikes, bombings and race riots. There were increasing fears of communist ideas and influences in the wake of the Bolshevik Revolution. These events touched off a draconian response by the U.S. federal government. Together with the young J. Edgar Hoover, Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer conducted mass raids and arrests of more than 1,000 suspected working-class radicals. The Department of Labor agreed that proclaimed membership in the Union of Russian Workers was a deportable offense. The ship set sail and docked in Finland, where trains transported the deportees into the Soviet Union. The vast majority of those deported had no criminal records and had never participated in any acts of terrorism. They were expelled for speaking out about their political opinions. According to Regan Schmidt, author of Red Scare, FBI, and the Origins of Anti-Communism in the United States, employers' associations fueled the anti-radical climate. They were engaged in an intense open-shop counterattack against post-war organizing campaigns and strike activity. The main goal was to discredit unions as subversive, Bolshevistic, and alien to basic American values. Donning the name The American Plan, closed shops were referred to as Sovietism in disguise, and propaganda campaigns were waged to ensure blacklists, internal union dissension, yellow dog contracts, and strike breaking.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. You know, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot-smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It always has, and it always will. Just as a reminder, we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where we are expecting temperatures much cooler than yesterday. Looks like we're only going to top out around 42 to 44 degrees, currently at 31 degrees Fahrenheit. We have gusts of wind topping 1 mile per hour. Ooh, it's going to blow me timbers over. Mostly cloudy conditions currently. Then off and on rain showers for the afternoon. Winds light and variable. Looks like the rain will bring us today a little more than 1/10 of an inch. Cloudy and lows in the mid-30s tonight. Winds light and variable. And then showers early tomorrow, becoming steady rain later in the day. Highs in the low 40s. And it looks like we're going to get over 1/3 of an inch of rain tomorrow. And then we will be getting, beginning late Thursday, snowy rain, and then snowy rain again on Friday, and then looks like steady snow for about a week. So we'll see how that goes. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have been updated and have increased, and we stand now at 255,052 confirmed cases of infection, and we have updated the deceased totals, and they've raised by 10 since the last time they were updated. We now stand at 370 confirmed dead from COVID-19. It keeps happening. Our numbers keep happening. Well, here's some good news. Pollen is rated as none right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index is in the good range at 40 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 1. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.1 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 93%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is, let me scroll down to London. Here we are. London is 43 and cloudy. Paris is 38 and sunny. Rome is 54 and fair. Kyiv is 13 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. Kabul is 40 degrees and cloudy. Hong Kong is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 46 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 74 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 42 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York, New York is a chilly 36 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Associated Press staff brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The State Department advised Americans yesterday, Monday, to avoid travel to Ukraine because of increased threats from Russia amid its military buildup along the country's border. In its new travel advisory, the department said Americans should be aware of reports that Russia is planning for significant military action against Ukraine and that security could deteriorate in the country. The State Department regularly issues travel advisories and had one in place for Ukraine already because of COVID-19, but this was unusual because of the direct warning about the massing of Russian troops along the Ukraine border, which has caused soaring tensions between Moscow and Washington in recent days. American citizens choosing to visit the country despite the warning should be aware the Russian military action anywhere in Ukraine would severely impact the U.S. Embassy's ability to provide consular services, including assistance to U.S. citizens departing Ukraine, it said. U.S. intelligence officials say Russia has moved 70,000 troops and is preparing for a possible invasion early next year. Moscow denies it has any plans to attack, as it did in 2014 when it annexed the Crimean Peninsula, but says it wants guarantees that Ukraine will never join NATO.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Frank Bajak and Vanessa Guerra of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The aggressive cell phone break-ins of a high-profile lawyer representing top Polish opposition figures came in the final weeks of pivotal 2019 parliamentary elections. 2 years later, a prosecutor challenging attempts by the populist right-wing government to purge the judiciary had her smartphone hacked. In both instances, the invader was military-grade spyware from NSO Group, the Israeli hack-for-hire outfit that the U.S. government recently blacklisted. Citizen Lab could not say who ordered the hacks, and NSO does not identify its clients, beyond saying it works only with legitimate government agencies vetted by Israel's defense ministry. But both victims believe Poland's increasingly illiberal government is responsible. A Polish state security spokesman would neither confirm nor deny whether the government ordered the hacks or is an NSO customer. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.